Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the podcast that, well, up until this point had no name. But I have exciting news because we've been running a little bit of a competition over the last few weeks on social media and email and so on, myself and my collaborators or partners in crime, Aaron and Michael. And well, before I come to the news that we do actually have a winner, we've had some fascinating suggestions, haven't we? Have you gentlemen heard any other kind of interesting ones in the last kind of week or so since the last show before we reveal the one we quite like?
What was it? There was one that was the band with no podcast, I remember, which was a riff on because there was the band with no name back in the day, which some Christians may remember, the kind of rap kind of rock group from the 90s, I think. So the band with no podcast kind of works. And then the other one, what was the other one? I think I had the idea because we had what kind of podcast? I thought that kind of podcast because it was like
interesting.
That kind of podcast. It's not really a podcast because they don't really know what they're doing.
Well, the other one I quite liked, which I shouldn't really like because I think I may have come up with it, but there was the Who Let the Ots Out. That was a good one. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a bit Michael Ots specific, but there we go. But it was amazing. Literally an hour or so before we dialed in to record this, a New Zealand friend of mine called Charles, who lives in London, who'd been listening to the show and really enjoying it, texted me and said, "Hey, you guys," if I could do a New Zealand accent, it'd be even better. He said, "Why don't you call it," drum roll please, "why don't you call it the Pod of the Gaps?" And we all thought that was brilliant, but that we think we're going to run with. But Michael, Aaron, why do you like that? For listeners who are going Pod of the Gaps, okay, interesting. Why do you guys like it?
Well, firstly, I like it because it's punny, and Andy and I have been known to delay bedtime by sending each other ridiculous puns because we can't be the last ones to stop. My wife's displeasure that I'm still sending Andy puns at 11:30 at night.
Is this like an accountability issue I have to have with you guys? Is there,
It is. In my defence, I'm a serial punner that I have those with many kind of friends, and Astrid's often like, "Put the phone away. It's 11 o'clock at night." Go, yeah, but
we should explain that it's obviously a pun of the idea of God of the Gaps, which is a terminology that comes up sometimes in apologetic discussions that people talk about God simply being a kind of God of the Gaps that does the things we don't understand. So this is a pod of the gaps, and actually kind of like it works because this is a podcast that hopefully fills a bit of a gap in a more positive way than God filling the gaps of scientific knowledge, I guess. But yes, we want it to fill the gap of a podcast that can engage with cultural issues from a kind of Christian theological point of view and think about how we can use that as a way of communicating the good news about Jesus as well.
Yeah.
So I like it.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, I'm surprised that such a late comer to the party is able to go run straight through, knock all the competition out the way. And,
I like the idea to me that because I work with a Kiwi as well. I think there's something about the New Zealand that sort of spirit there. It's chilled, it's a bit laid back, not quite Californian. It's a bit more street cred than that, a bit more sophisticated. But that kind of walking in, going, yeah. This is what you need. So,
basically a Joe Maloma of like all black rugby, isn't it? They're just like everyone else does their thing. Give him the ball. He's going to get a try.
That's what they're going to get. So we are going to run with it. And it suddenly occurred to me, of course, then people who are new to the show, who watch the first few episodes, are going to go, what? It says Pod of the Gaps up there, but down here it's something else. But there we are. It is indeed Pod of the Gaps.
But Andy, that does mean, of course, we have to think of something else to talk about at the beginning of our show.
Yeah, how we're going to fill 4 minutes of airtime, I don't know. Well, I'm sure we'll find something else.
People can send suggestions, like instead of sending suggestions about what we should call it, you could tell us what innocuous and vacuous conversation we can have to fill the first 4 minutes of this podcast.
Aaron's a theologian. We could talk about what heresies he's considered this week, but put to one side. Michael likes traveling. We could talk about what countries he hasn't been to because he can't. And me, we could see who else, what other famous people I've, sat on a toilet after or something.
That's right.
All kinds of things. But rather than do that, let's crack on with today's episodes of Pod of the Gaps. I got to train myself to say that because I've been so used to saying the other one. But Pod of the Gaps. And the topic today is an interesting one because it's a kind of perennial topic, but it's also a very topical topic because as we record this, for folks listening, It was just a few days ago when headlines are made around the world because Meghan Markle and Prince Harry appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show in the States and just basically kind of laid in to the British monarchy and how terrible it was and yada, yada, yada. And I confess I watched brief snippets and went, yeah, there's a reason I don't watch Oprah. But it was amazing the headlines it made. But then there was also quite a lot of criticism. And one of my friends who writes a popular blog, I think for me summed it up when he said, quite frankly, he said, to me, I couldn't understand why people were obsessing. It was a couple of millionaires complaining to another millionaire about how they've been mistreated by a third group of millionaires. But that very sort of issue and the whole vacuousness of the interview opens up something I thought would be great to talk about in the show, which is the kind of celebrity culture that we live in. That even if you don't have much to say, even if you've just had maybe Meghan has had a terrible experience, I don't know, or in one sense, I don't know her, so I can't comment. But the fact that fields so much airtime, it does seem to be that if you can sit on the couch next to Oprah, if you're an Instagram influencer with enough followers, if you're just sort of somehow by an accident of life famous enough, then suddenly you can shape the whole media narrative around you. We seem to live in this celebrity-obsessed, vacuous culture that doesn't just frustrate Christians, but does frustrate Christians. So I suppose the question I want to start is thinking about Michael or Aaron, whichever one of you want to have a stab at this as we dig into this. How, as Christians, do we respond? Do we run away from it? Do we ignore it? Do we just absorb it like everybody else in the culture? Do we try and think critically about it? How do we engage in a world of celebrity culture where people seem to be ever more content to paddle in the shallow end?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that first, if that's all right. I think I'll always have to take a stab at Harry and Meghan if needed. I think the issue that you raise is an important one because it points to the fact that we have lost something in Western culture at large. So Western culture is, I think it's appropriate to say, more celebrity obsessed by a significant margin than other cultures. I think all cultures do have an equivalent of celebrity worship. It's clear that the Western world has done that, has run with that to a greater extent. And some of that is filling, it's without the pot of the gaps, it's filling the gaps of transcendence in our kind of postmodern culture. That we've tried to sort of evacuate the sense of the divine, the sense that God is worthy of worship, or indeed many people, anyone's worthy of sort of emulation or something, or hero worship, which has kind of always been present in human cultures. And we're trying now to fill it with basically people who have a shorter term fix, maybe. So it's almost as though our heroes are not as worthy as they used to be. I don't think hero worship is a new thing. Hero worship is, there's loads of evidence of it in ancient cultures everywhere. And in ancient literature, think of Homer's The Iliad and Virgil's Aeneid and things like this. There's heroes in all of these kind of writings in history. So they're kind of celebrity, like Achilles is a kind of celebrity, whether fictional or other, I guess. But you get real life figures who are sort of glamorized in this way. They become emulating people who are worthy of emulation. And I think in the modern era, what's really happened there is we don't have any heroes, or our heroes have a lower bar or something. But there's something also to link, and the final thing I'll say on this little bit would be saints as well. We don't, because of the lack of transcendence, we also used to have a culture, I guess, where you're looking at people who are worthy of emulation, particularly relating to their spiritual sort of holiness and condition. I know that as Protestants, we wouldn't hold saints in high regard, but it's still a culture, we still revere heroes. So though we don't officially have saints, we will look back at our heroes in the Christian tradition. And so even some of that is like a celebrity culture, but you're looking at someone for a particular reason, worthy of imitation. There's all sorts of things we're going to talk about that. But just to say, I think it's almost like, we've taken over, the Western culture has taken over what was possibly a good thing. And it's been sort of trashed a little bit, toxificated, if that's even a word.
That's fascinating. I'm listening to Andy's kids, I think, having a fight outside their door. I think, are they wanting to be celebrities? and get on the
I
show.
think they just a celebrity. They're asking for autographs, aren't they?
Basically, they've heard that we have such a wide listenership globally. They're just like, he's locked the door to stop them
That was
getting
quite
in.
dramatic, actually. I was thinking of editing it out, but I might leave it in so listeners like, what on earth just happened? My son has this quite sort of wonderful maniacal villain's laugh, and that was definitely my son going, so there we are.
Where did he get that from? I wonder.
I can't imagine. Sorry, anyway.
I love what you were saying, though, Aaron. I think that's a fascinating thought. And in the sense, we now live in a culture where people can be famous for just being famous. Like it used to be, you had to do something to be a celebrity. You'd have to be a really good footballer. You'd have to have become a leader. You kind of work your way into a position. Whereas you kind of, when you watch these kind of like, I'm a celebrity, get me out of there. Although I think we should maybe kind of rename it, I want to be a celebrity, get me in there. Or I used to be a celebrity, get me back in there. Because you kind of watch people and it's like, actually, like, a lot of them is like, well, what are they famous for? They're famous for just being kind of famous, like, influencers, for instance, what are they actually famous for? What have they actually done to make, in a sense, them worthy of that attention, that focus? And often that, I guess that's a new thing, maybe. And maybe that's been facilitated by social media, particularly the idea that I can get to a position of celebrity without necessarily kind of achieving anything along the way to if you can say deserve it in inverted commas.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you say that, Michael, because I remember reading there was a survey done 2 or 3 years ago, I think, showing that picking up the fact that here in the UK, and I suspect the figure would be the same probably for other Western countries, that over 50% of young people, teenagers, when asked what they wanted to be when they left high school, the answer was famous. And that's quite interesting because it picks up what you were saying. They're not famous for doing something. It wasn't, well, I want to discover the cure for, cancer or folk music appreciation, or something and thus become, famous that way. It was just purely famous for fame's sake. And then, of course, you couple that not just with social media, but I suppose the sort of TV, sort of talent show sort of culture as well that was always there, but has really become big in recent years. The idea that you might be an ordinary person, you might appear for your 50 minutes of fame on the right TV show, or your YouTube video might go viral, and then suddenly you've achieved it. You've achieved the goal because you've been famous. And that struck me actually, Aaron, as you were talking about. There's celebrities, if you like, in the past, Achilles and so on from sort of Greek sort of tradition. Of course, they're all famous for something, for actually doing something. And I just wonder whether, I'm very conscious that we don't view the past through, rosy-coloured spectacles, but this phenomenon of just being famous for the sake of being famous for being famous, that is a uniquely modern phenomena.
Absolutely, I agree with that. I think that's something that that's why I was saying earlier, we've invented it because we don't have transcendent meaning, I guess, in our, thinking of the much quoted philosopher Charles Taylor, who speaks of the fact that the modern world is secularized to the extent where it creates a kind of framework inside which it can try to understand itself fully without any transcendence, the immanent frame, as he would call it. So we don't need transcendence. We're the first culture that sort of not required transcendence to give us meaning. And various Western philosophers have sort of reflected on that over the last 200 years or so. And I think, what do? We actually still want transcendence. We still want heroes. So we're going to find them somehow, even if they're not worthy of our admiration. And as you say, Andy, there's all sorts of idolatry linked into that as well. It strikes me as amazing. I remember preaching a sermon to a youth group a number of years ago when I'd first realised the phrase, Elvis has left the building. And it was the end of I think it was a Scouting for Girls song. Do you remember that band who were just like, we're going to call our band what all of our songs are basically about, and we're just going to go out there, we're not going to hide it. And I think the end of one of their songs, there was the phrase, Elvis has left the building. Elvis isn't dead was the song, I think. And I was thinking, why is that phrase a thing? Why is that phrase a thing? I was like, gosh, it's crazy. They had to tell all the screaming fans, Elvis isn't here anymore, so you can go home. You think, what a crazy thing. You think of the human heart yearning for someone who can give them something no one else can give them. I'm going to stay here screaming and shouting until I know for sure that Elvis is not here anymore. Otherwise, why would I want to leave? There's something quite spiritual and religious about that whole process. So I think it's fulfilling the void of something, not just of heroes, but actually of God himself.
Yeah. There's one more thing I wanted to perhaps tease out on the general cultural piece before then perhaps turning it in a Christian direction, our conversation, because I'm very conscious as we talk about this, we could just sit here and just have a pop at the secular culture and say, isn't it great we're Christians, because we would never do anything like this. So we might come to that in a moment. But Michael, maybe your thoughts on this. It occurred to me as Aaron was talking there, the little question I just jotted down on my notes was, do you think it's the case that we actually get the heroes and celebrities we deserve? Because it's interesting which way this goes. We could sort of say, oh, it's terrible as a society. Look at all these celebrities and so forth, and look at the way they're behaving. And, it's the Kardashians this and, Meghan Markle the other, and goodness knows whatever. But which way is the rot gone? Is it that we as a culture have actually become increasingly kind of shallow with the attention span of newts and happy to just, click away on the like button on our phone like a rat trying to get a treat out of a maze? And actually the celebrities have kind of emerged from that because that's not actual flank, or is it the other way around? I'm just intrigued which way it goes.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, because in a sense, like these things only get traction because people, give it traction and attention and interest. And so I guess maybe there's a bit both ways. But certainly, the fact that we get drawn naturally to that seems to be like, and that we give attention to it. I don't know, like particularly with the kind of the Meghan and Harry interview, part of me was just kind of, I'm not going to get drawn into this, partly because I was just like so frustrated, thinking, here we are discussing it in a podcast. But I guess just what does that show though, that we get drawn into kind of, we all need to or want to kind of talk about that? What does it show about us? I think there's a bit of both. I think particularly the way that media works and social media works now, certainly we do have a great power in dictating what will get attention and what doesn't, in terms of like the general populace. Whereas in the past, it would be an editor that makes a decision in terms of this is what we're going to give precedence to and this is what we're going to ignore. Like in a sense, the way that social media works would mean that actually it's quite democratic in the sense that we decide what's going to become popular and what's not, what stories are going to really go and travel somewhere to an extent, by the amount of attention and interest that we give to it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting on that, Michael, that obviously there's also the sort of technocratic corporations that people are talking about a lot at the moment, where it's not democratic. So, for example, my wife just started trying to set up a blog, but realizing now the internet is not like it was when we were young. And the internet first came out and you could write something and there was this thing called organic reach, where you could just put stuff out there and then it got out there. The internet doesn't actually work like that at all anymore. It works entirely, on an algorithm basis with SEO, sort of optimization, search engine optimization, and things like this, whereby if you don't market yourself or market things in certain ways to get the likes and all the rest of it, no one will see it. It doesn't get noticed, which is why, of course, you should like and subscribe to Part of the Gaps, but that's another matter entirely, not related at all. But it is interesting, isn't it? That, we do live in an online world which is different to what it was when it started, and some people haven't actually caught up with that. How much it isn't actually as democratic as we might think.
I mean, I guess one thing to throw in is this may be controversial, but this is off the back of a conversation I was having last year, and it was fascinating in terms of how Black Lives Matter as a movement, became massive in a very short space of time. And I was kind of reflecting on it and why and how that kind of happened. Because it's not that, sadly, what happened to George Floyd was an exception. Tragically, these kind of things happen regularly. So why did it get such traction last year? And I spoke to a friend of mine who's Black and was just kind of asking his kind of experience on it. And he said, well, when did it last hit the media? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, just search search Black Lives Matter. When did it last peak in the media? It's 4 years ago. What happened 4 years ago? What's happening this year? It's an American election. Like, it's no surprise that this has gained the traction it has, because there are people really pushing it because they know that there's a political spin that we can put on this. Now, I'm not at all saying, like, therefore we just reject it all, but the fact that it got the traction it did was not accidental. There were people who were actually actively using it for that purpose. So you're right, actually. Yeah, to what extent, without a lot of money or influence and expertise in those kind of areas, can you get traction, or how much is it determined by stuff outside of our control?
Oh, that's really interesting. I think the other thing that occurred as you, just before you said that, Michael, is the old kind of phrase that was, thrown around the time when the Roman Empire was in trouble, and the poor were getting a bit rebellious and threatening to overthrow the whole thing. And of course, the phrase "bread and circuses." Right, the emperors figured out, well, if we just give the crowds some bread and put on the gladiatorial games and give them stuff to entertain them, they won't cause trouble. And I do think, celebrity culture may be part of the same thing today, as you say, that I think there's that sort of sense, let's get you to look over here, or let's get you to get obsessed about, what these, sort of famous people are doing over here, but not ask the questions that maybe we need to be asking, whether it's about the environment or justice or racism or some of those things. And sometimes the issues that we do need to talk about get missed, even when celebrities may be paying lip service to them. And I thought that was one of the things that was interesting about the Meghan Markle piece, that all the talk about race and stuff, that's a hugely important issue we need to talk about as a culture, because it does exist, and there's a number of issues that I think that the society need to face up to. But with the very greatest respect, I don't think having Meghan and Harry witter on to somebody who's like Oprah is really going to change that issue. People are just going to sit and munch their popcorn and go, "Oh, look at the famous people and the nice set," and then the attention will move on to the next thing. So I think bread and circuses explain some of it. But let's talk about Christians and celebrity for a moment, because it's easy to sit here and poke the culture with a stick. And I think as Christians we're quite guilty of doing that a lot. And on this podcast, we don't want to do that. I think there are times we can learn a lot from the culture. I think the times that the culture has picked things up ahead of the church. And then there's also times where the church gets a bit affected by the culture, as we talked about in an episode or so ago. And so when it comes to Christians and celebrity, what do we make of the fact that we're not perhaps immune from that? We have our own Christian celebrities, and certainly as a British Christian, it'd be very easy to go, it's the Yanks, it's the American church that's full of its, major celebrities and so forth. But that's actually not the case. It's just the celebrities change different in the different Christian subcultures. If you're, if you're more sort of more reformed, conservative, evangelical British end of things, I mean, we've had our John Stotts and whoever's, or the dead ones, C.S. Lewis. I mean, to go, stick a C.S. Lewis quote on a meme and you can guarantee 200 likes before lunchtime, and so on. So we still seem to the same idea, don't we? Of let's get the famous person, let's stick them on a pedestal, or because somebody's got the presence and the reach they have, they must be authoritative. But I'm not sure what it says about the Christian world that say someone like, Joel Osteen has the following that he has, whereas, somebody who's perhaps much more biblical and much more grounded doesn't have anything like the kind of following. So how do we navigate this as Christians?
Yeah.
I guess, like I was saying earlier, and kind of think about it, there is nothing wrong in a sense with recognizing a particular authority in a particular area, and that's historically what we've done. So, if in the secular culture, there'll be people who will be well known because they are particularly good and respected at being able to play football, or at being a particular academic, or whatever, and that's recognizing something that is that stands out, and that's a very natural thing, and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. I think where it's potentially become a problem is where people are now basically being promoted, can I say, to the level of their incompetence. And so we push people forwards, but not because they necessarily should be in that position, but because we've now got a really good kind of marketing strategy that means that actually if we've got the right kind of setup, we can get into a position of influence because we've got the tools to do that. So I think, historically, biblically, obviously there were Christian leaders who were well known in the first century, and through history there have been Christian leaders who've rightly been respected because they have been influential, and there's something right and biblical about that, I think. But then there's a danger, particularly in the current context, in which I now think all I need to do to be able to get that kind of influence or reach is I need to employ a marketing strategist who can tell me how I can best, work the algorithm or whatever to get me into that position. And then that becomes unhelpful because we're getting people pushed, as it were, unnaturally into positions of leadership and influence, maybe spiritually immature, and actually they're not able to handle those situations. And then it's kind of, they rise rapidly, and then there's this massive implosion when it all starts to fall apart.
Yeah, I agree with that, Michael. I think it is interesting, they're saying about we have to keep harkening back that it's not a bad thing to revere people who are worthy of imitation. So Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. We think of Hebrews 13:7. Remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God, and consider their ways and imitate their faith. I remember hearing that for the first time when I was actually thinking about this question, listening to John Piper used to do an amazing series of biography talks at his Desiring God conference every year. And incredible, kind of like sermons off through the story of a great thinker, because he's reformed, and so you're not really supposed to be about people. It's more about the glory of God all the time. There's almost a contradiction in revering these figures because you're supposed to be pointing everyone to Christ. But he would often open those sessions by reminding everyone about Hebrews 13:7. We are supposed to do this. It is good to do this, to look at these people because they help us think about Christ, because they point to Christ in the way that John the Baptist did. He must increase, I must decrease. Sorry. And that's, a really important part of this. It's not, a thing we can't really afford to just say, oh, we're not going to look up to people. We're not going to try and mentor people or not try to be worthy of imitation. Because clearly that there's a biblical strain in that. There's heroes all the way through the Bible. Hebrews 11, of course, just before that, what I mentioned there, it's a list of heroes. And we're not supposed to just look at them and go, well, everyone's the same. Everyone just has faith and everyone's loved by God. So they're just completely dull. The Bible would be a pretty short book if you could just say that. Whereas actually, there's the contours of individual characters who are worthy of imitation, which I think we need to keep hold of. I think to what Andy, you were saying before, there is a danger, that the celebrity Christian culture has literally just aped the way it works in the secular world. It's like we see them doing it like this, so this is how we will do it too. And Michael was touching on that as well, with how you can learn this or that to get yourself up to that platform. And the very platforms that enable you to rise so fast, as Michael was saying, will be just as quick to kind of throw you down the stairs, the banister at the other end.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to say, I think there's wisdom in there because you say we can throw the baby out with the bathwater, ignore things like Hebrews 13. And elsewhere, and maybe what's required is maybe thinking about what are some of the tests that we can put Christian celebrity to. So if somebody has got profile, to ask, well, is it appropriate profile? And you can obviously ask the character ones, you can ask the accountability ones, someone in good standing with the church and so forth. The other thing I've actually found helpful sometimes over the years, it's not perfect, but it is a helpful guide, is to ask sort of two questions: how is that person you're thinking of or looking at? Are they using their celebrity to help others? Particularly others who are not as well known, and that's always a good test. Are they willing to give space to others? Are they willing? And there are secular celebrities who are equally good at this, but I think as Christians, to go, not hogging all the glory for themselves, but willing to share some of the limelight. And then actually another rough acid test is how often when I read someone's Twitter feed do I end up thinking about them, or how often do I end up thinking through them about Jesus? And if it's the latter, then I'm much more comfortable. One of the examples I often give in this, he's not a major celebrity, but when his book came out, he was quite well known. And
Michael Ots.
No, not Michael Ots. Michael is always what I think of when I think of Christian celebrity. But after I've thought about Michael Ots,
I was just thinking, how gracious it was of you to allow us to come and enjoy your celebrity.
Right, he's showing that.
You're modelling this yourself. You've got this massive social media following, and you allow Aaron and I to come and share his glory.
Yes, invited into the ring.
No, I was thinking about someone. I think certainly you know him, Michael, if Aaron does, but David Bennett, is a friend based out in Oxford, and David's book War of Love is just amazing. His testimony of how he came from being a gay atheist, a gay activist, an atheist, to following Christ, and that book went wildly popular when it first came out. And what I always used to say, what I admired about David, is that whenever he would tell his testimony, whenever you read his book, I didn't come away from his book thinking about him. I love that book because you come away thinking about Jesus. And he has a wonderful job, and a wonderful job of using his platform. Nabil Qureshi, my late friend Nabil Qureshi, was another. His book, New York Times bestseller, 300,000 copies of that book, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. But you heard Nabil speak, and boy, it was amazing. He had a huge commanding presence. He was over 6 foot. He was a big stage filling guy, but his sessions would always bring you into land on Jesus. You'd come away thinking about Christ, and I think that's a good test. But if you come away thinking about the celebrity, I just wonder that's where things are unhelpful.
Just also on that, something I found really helpful in ministry, actually, because we can all be prone to this, wanting to have a platform or position. But I remember early on, as I was kind of starting to do more traveling and accept kind of speaking engagements outside of the church that I was working for, there was a situation where I'd said yes to going to speak at a smaller university gathering, and then a much bigger university Christian union asked me to go and speak. And I remember talking to a Christian friend and saying, what should I do? Because I really want to go do this big one. And I'll never forget what they said. They said, make it your aim to focus on the depth of your ministry and let the Lord worry about the breadth of your ministry. And that one line has always stuck with me kind of through ministry, which is actually our job as Christian ministers, if we're in Christian ministry, is to actually focus on our character, digging into God's words, being the very best at what we can be, and in a sense handing over the breadth of our platform to the sovereignty of God, and saying, well, actually God might choose to give me a global platform that can be used for his glory, or it may be in a very small local parish situation where no one will hear of me. And I think a good example of that is someone like John Lennox, who's probably one of the most well-known Christian leaders in the world. Think of a kind of Christian apologist, he would be up there, wouldn't he? Globally, as someone who's recognizable. Yeah, interestingly for John, his kind of celebrity status as a Christian apologist only came fairly late in life. For most of his life, he was an unknown mathematics lecturer at Cardiff University. He was traveling all over Eastern Europe, giving lectures and teaching, pouring himself out. And then suddenly, through doing one debate with Richard Dawkins, he hits, the kind of Christian limelight, but he wasn't seeking it. And in a sense, he could handle it because he had spent a whole lifetime of studying God's word, so that he had something to say. Now he has a platform. And sometimes we can get platforms too quickly. And then we have nothing to say, and we dry up pretty quick.
Yeah, that's a good point, Michael. And that kind of leads us into the next one. I was just thinking that, as you're saying, that the depth thing is huge, isn't it? That there's a need for spending time in the wilderness, as it were, out of the limelight. And that's again a really strong Christian tradition of that. Whether you talk about monks who literally had to withdraw for a certain seasons, or various kind of so-called saints over the years who would need that time away from the limelight in order to have something to say when they were in it. Of course, Jesus is a great example as well, modeling that for us. And it's something that we can't possibly usually think of a situation where us not being famous was a good thing. We always would think, if we had the option of being famous, that would always be a good thing, because think of the ministry opportunities. I could speak to these people. You may get there's boundless opportunities here, but actually that's not going to be there's so many genuinely theological Christian reasons why it's a bad idea for you to be in the limelight, genuinely. But I think the reason I will maybe just transition onto this platform thing a little bit longer will be because obviously you said, Michael, about giving things over to the grace and sovereignty of God for these things, which I think is a great way to think of this. And yet at the same time, we are called to do stuff, and we're called to be, I guess, consistent with what we believe and wanting to get a message out there. Right? We want to be in the agora, in the marketplace, as Paul was in the marketplace in Athens. We need to be there. And the agora today would be probably social media and some of these platforms which lead to celebrity culture. So for Christians who want to build platforms and who feel they're called to do it, and there's to some extent a need to engage in that sort of dirty world of platform building, what does what does one do? Maybe I'll throw it over to Michael first. Well, partly, and I'm saying this because I don't really have a platform. I'm trying. I'm the academic in the background almost. But I was thinking about it recently. I'm about to start a blog as well, and my first post would probably have to be. I feel like as a self-aware post. Is it a good idea to have a blog? Because it's normally the natural default. Oh, I ought to because everyone else has one, or everyone else has a rampaging Twitter feed. It isn't always the best thing to actually do. So those of you who do have much better platforms, like you fine chaps, tell us about it. And of course, feel free to plug your Twitter handle and your new books. I think Andy's got a new book, isn't he? He might tell us about that. But seriously, how do you guys reflect on platform building?
Yeah, I think it's been something I've been, wrestling with recently. So I've got a YouTube channel that's got, I think, 60 subscribers. And I was thinking, I kind of think some of these talks might be helpful for people. And then you kind of look at some stuff out there that's you think it's not great, and it's got thousands of subscribers, and you kind of think how can I get more? And I guess, partly it's a question of motivation, isn't it? So what makes something sinful or not is not always what we do, but the motivation behind it. So I think, if the motivation genuinely is, I want many people to hear about Jesus who don't know about Jesus, and I want God to be glorified, that's great. So, if we want to, if I was physically, on a university mission week, we'd go and hand out flyers. We would, invite people to the events. Now, I'm speaking at it, but we do that because we want them to hear about Jesus. Okay. So we don't see that as kind of platform building for our own glory. We see that as, wanting to raise awareness. So I think for me, partly it's just having to go back to what is my motivation here? Is it just to be able to say, I've got X number of followers, I've got all that going? Or is it, I think this is genuinely might be helpful for people and I'd like to get that out there. So that's the first question. And then I think the second question is sometimes it is helpful to know how these things work, and there are kind of practical things that you can do that would be helpful if you are wanting to get people to notice stuff and things that maybe you wouldn't do. So a certain degree of being informed about the way of using kind of platforms and social media well. But to an extent also, one of the things I've discovered is that there's a kind of randomness to it. So I guess being in lockdown over the last year, I have put more stuff out online just because that's one of the primary platforms where we can do stuff, without having many physical meetings. And so I've kind of written a few things, put out some videos, and you put out some of them, and I think, this is great. This is going to be really helpful. I get really excited about it, and then you share it, and basically my mum likes it, and that's about it. And then there was another situation where I wrote something kind of about 10:30 at night. It was just kind of it was playing on my mind, and within 2 days, it had been shared 600 times and watched and for me that was pretty huge. Wow. Nothing kind of before or since had, but it wasn't. I had no idea what was going to take off and what didn't. But in a sense, that's okay. I just put stuff out there and and leave it in the sense of leave it with God. So those are some of the thoughts, I guess, behind it. But I don't know. Andy has a much bigger social media platform than I do, so I'll hand to the experts.
And of course, Andy was watching he was one of the ones who shared one of the 600 who shared your post that night.
And that's 599 times I shared that post. And, exhausting evening. I did insomnia. I just kept clicking the button and kind of thing. But yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I confess, I can remember the first time I heard the word platform when somebody sort of said, "Oh, Andy, you need a platform," which is someone who's 5'8" and some change. I took to be a comment about the fact they couldn't see me from the back of the room, but apparently that wasn't that kind of wasn't it. And yeah, but it is, as Michael said, a weird thing. Risk of a cheap platform building plug. I've just got a book out so that my do Muslims and Christians worship the same God. Book comes out $9.99 from all good booksellers. But it's slightly weird. It's both exciting. It is very exciting. Then Michael's written as well, and Aaron, I know you've done academic stuff and are working in popular stuff. That moment when the box of books arrives for your author copies and you open it and you first see this thing you've been working on and you're so excited. You think it's a message for the world that you want to encourage and equip people. And as Michael said, point people to Christ. And everything in you wants to get it out there, but then also you also end up feeling slightly dirty after 48 hours now of memes and graphics and publishers saying, "Oh, can you share this?" And the social media person at work going, "All right, I've created 3 like Instagram posts for you. Can you post them at these times and stuff?" And it all feels a bit like me. So it's a weird line to walk. I mean, I think the things you can do as a Christian who feels, because of your job, and many of us do it, work in jobs where you have to. If you're an author or a writer, there's also something about honouring the publisher. The publisher's invested money in you. It's your job as an author to help them, at least see that returned.
And just to jump in on that one, Andy, just quickly, I didn't realise this when though I've only had academic books published thus far, it's amazing how much you don't know if you don't have anything published, or how much that when people are self-promoting, they're not actually doing it entirely just because they want to get lots of likes for the sake of it. They're being told they have to do it as part of sometimes it's contractual, sometimes it's actually a key thing, and you want to help the publisher. And so I've seen other people on Facebook and thought, before I knew this, I would have thought, oh, who do they think they are? Promoting their, hawking their wares. But now I kind of see people who have got books out, and I know they sort of have to do that because it's a key part of a marketing strategy.
It's just like that. So there's that piece too, you're right. So, but then in terms of how you walk the line, I guess Michael's talked about keeping it Jesus-centered. I think that's at least a good filter to put things through. And then the other one I come back to is C.S. Lewis wanted something interesting, and it's interesting, right? There's a man who ended up with a huge platform without really trying very hard, which is interesting. But Lewis talked famously about humility. And he said people have got the wrong idea about humility. People often think humility is doing a great piece of work and then going, "Oh, it's not really good. It's really quite useless, actually." He said that's not humility. That's just lying. Humility, he said, it would be like this. It would be like a person, like an architect who's designed the most beautiful, building, most beautiful cathedral that's ever been designed. And they know it's the best and they celebrate that fact, but they are no more excited about it than if someone else had designed it. And so you take a joy in the thing in itself. And a question I sometimes ask myself is like, the book I've just done, if a friend, I've got lots of friends working in this field, had written it, like if Michael had written this book and gone, I've just written this book on this, I'm really excited about it, and I take a look, oh, it's brilliant. Would I talk about it? Would I tweet about it? And the answer is, I think I would. And if hopefully people who follow my social media stuff will see I'm always banging on about books. 99% of the time, there are other books I've read. Like the other week, it was Rod Dreher's book, Live Not by Lies, that we'll talk about in a later show. But right now happens to be my own. And that can be helpful grid to put it through. The only thing I would say is that those are 2 great filters, but then human beings, boy, are we very good at self-deceit. It's very easy to go, oh, yeah, this is Jesus-focused. And I would do the same with somebody else. But boy, the heart is deceitful above all things. And of course, we live in a culture which one of my Canadian friends likes to characterize with the letters PBA, performance-based acceptance. We live in this culture that tells us, actually, you're not worth something unless you've got enough Facebook likes. You're not worth something unless people are reading your stuff and talking about your stuff. And that works in other ways, but that whole performance-based acceptance thing, that underpins social media. And there's something, I think, very toxic at the heart of celebrity culture and social media in the way it encourages us to find our identity in how people engage with our stuff rather than in other places.
And I think on that, in terms of all our conversations about Christian celebrity, celebrity in the secular world as well, like it's asking what is at the heart, like what is that toxic thing at the heart? And I remember years ago listening to a sermon by Tim Keller on Esther, which has always struck with me because he was basically talking about Haman, the kind of baddie in the story of Esther. Yeah. And here's this guy who wants everyone to like him. He wants everyone to go around saying, this is the man the king honors. And, and it's not enough that everyone does that. He needs the king to do that because he needs to be thought well of, not just by as many people as possible, but by as many important people as possible. It doesn't matter if some homeless man says, Michael, I think you're great. If someone of importance thinks I'm great, that gives me, a greater sense of kind of acceptance and notice and so on. And so that kind of, but the trouble is that's never enough. We want to get more and more and more. And you can see that in him, in this kind of self-destructive desire for celebrity. But then Keller had a brilliant line at the end. It really struck me. He said, Haman's problem was not that he wanted the wrong thing, but he wanted it from the wrong king. In other words, we all want to be noticed. We all want approval from people whose approval matters. But ultimately, that's because we need approval from the one whose approval really does matter, which is God himself. And if we don't have that, no amount of approval, no amount of celebrity will ever actually satisfy us. Whether we're Christian or not, we'll be searching and searching, and it will satisfy us for a few minutes. But then we'll need more. We'll need more likes next time. We'll need someone even more important than Andy Bannister to retweet it or whatever. And actually, the gospel says actually that desire is there. And it's right, but you're needing to channel it back to the God who put it there in the first place. And of course, wonderfully in the gospel, we have this offer that we can have the approval, the pleasure, and the smile of God upon our lives. And I don't know, for me, that kind of helps at the end of the day, when we've done stuff, just to say, actually, what has my desire been today? Has it been to be noticed by others, or has it been to be noticed by God? Is it his pleasure and smile? Which then frees us, doesn't it? Because I'm not then thinking, is this going to be popular or not? Ultimately, my kind of baseline is this going to please God or not? And then just one other thing that I found really helpful on that, but years ago, listening to a talk by Jack Miller, who was actually, I think, kind of the mentor of Tim Keller years before, but far lesser known. And he just said something very helpful to people in Christian ministry. He said, do something every day only that no one else will know about, just because you love God. In other words, make it a kind of principle to do an act of love for God that will be unnoticed and will not get any other attention other than from the Lord, as a way of just kind of refocusing your heart and making sure that you're not doing this for the attention of others, but for him. And I thought that's a very helpful kind of challenge, really, in this kind of culture to kind of think about. So, I found that helpful.
That's really good. Yeah, I think that, did he write the book called The Servant-Hearted Leader? I think it might be.
Jack
Miller, I think it was. But as you were saying, the coming to the end of the day of, reflecting on your day in that way, I really like that. That's kind of nice. It made me think of I've got this little book that I occasionally dip into in that regard, called A Puritan Golden Treasury, one of these old Banner of Truth books. It's kind of falling apart at the seams, not because I've read it that much, but I think it's an old book. And it has just quotations from Puritans, and Puritans, boy, do they know how to take you down 10 pegs and refocus your heart. And then I just find it really helpful just to kind of immerse yourself in the kind of perspective, as you're saying, where you're just not focused on the attention and limelight or whatever good you think you can be doing in other people's eyes, but focusing back on our true source of attention, which should be God entirely. So worship as our kind of metric for that is a wonderful way of thinking about that. I guess we ought to close up shop there for another day, right? Now we've talked about all of our the tensions with celebrities and things. We do want you to like and subscribe to the podcast and share it to others. Are we being hypocrites? I guess we are, but we still want you to do that. And hopefully we've been able to get into it in a way that shows that being aware of the tension doesn't mean you don't therefore try to still live in this world and try to get the message out there in whatever ways that is required, and you keep yourself accountable and keep your focus worshipfully, as Michael so helpfully just reminded us there. So until next time, we won't see you, you won't see us, but you can hear us at some other point in the future. Farewell.
Bye for now.
Bye.